Hey, it's Jerry and Tony from Them Nerds. We're going to be talking today about WandaVision. But before we get into that, we're going to talk about our giveaway. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment for a chance to win this Funko Pop. Just think about it. You should have shelf space someplace in your house that you need this toy. I'm sure your significant other is going to love it sitting there. So just go ahead and leave a comment below. Wanda took all that time to create her own village and town. You can't take enough time to leave a comment. Let's just get it, just do it. It's not that hard. So let's get into this episode. Ready, Tony?
Oh, I'm ready.
So this is the first episode that we see where there's no theme. There's no theme song at all. It goes straight into just the Marvel icon that we've known now for the last, decade with all the movies, except for this time it's purple, kind of going off the idea of what Agatha was using with her powers last time. But the actual story gets started with a small town. Picture it. Salem, 1693. 9 witches enter the forest to do dark magic. 8 witches end up dead. One of those witches that lived was Agatha. What did you think of the scene?
I loved it. I love the idea that, first of all, we know from the comics that there's this connection to Salem for Agatha Harkness. And so we get to see it here, and we assume, I assumed that she was being led into the forest to, be tried for being a witch. But in fact, it was witches that were trying her for being a naughty witch.
Yeah.
Right.
I kind of thought the idea that maybe there was something else kind of going with this whole idea, because, they call her up and they say, "Are you a witch?" She said, obviously admits that she is. But if you notice, when all the witches go to attack her, the only person that kind of holds off is the mother.
Right.
And it almost made me wonder whether or not it was an ultimate trick to give her all their powers in the first place.
It seems like it.
So, yeah. Because, ultimately at the very end, the mother does the same thing and kind of falls into line. And then we see, Agatha take that brooch that we've seen now for the last, 5 out of the 8 episodes.
Right.
And so we know there's some kind of tie in there. But now we're back into the real world, and we see Agatha. She still has Wanda downstairs in her basement and, breathing in all that mold. And we find out that Wanda, her powers don't work there. Is she a good witch? Is she a bad witch? We'll never know because she can't use her powers.
That's right.
But Agatha has the chance to go ahead and show her that the reason why she can't use her powers is because she has put runes up around the wall. And one of those runes look very familiar. It looked very much like a Magneto symbol to me. Also, from the comics, you will see it looks very similar to the Midgard. Did I say that right? I believe
pretty sure Midgard.
Yeah, Midgard symbol for their realm.
That's right.
And she kind of she ends up holding Wanda there using her magic as she goes around showing her how she can turn that fly into a bird. And she's basically challenging this idea of, how have I been alive for all these hundreds of years and I can barely turn this fly into a bird, yet you obviously have no idea what you're doing, and you're creating a whole town and directing these people how to live their lives.
That's right.
But while you also are in that room, you also see that the rabbit is kind of hopping around freely. And at one point, you see him standing in front of a book. And on that book's front cover, I don't know if you noticed it or not, there was a tree, which was very similar to me to not only the tree in Captain America #1, the movie, where the Red Skull goes in and pulls out that the Tesseract off the wall. It was very similar to that. It's also very Celtic, and so we have this idea that a lot of people think that these books somehow came from the ancient one, and obviously the ancient one that we've all seen is Celtic, so there's a possibility there too. What do you think of that?
Right, yeah, and also the imagery of the tree harkens back to the idea of Yggdrasil, the tree of life in Norse mythology, which connects a little bit. You mentioned Midgard, which is a term we've heard from the Thor films. In Norse mythology, Yggdrasil is the tree of life, and it's the tree upon which all the realms rest. And that kind of also gives you this hint that perhaps we're dealing with multiple realities or multiple dimensions or something like that. When I saw that rune and you mentioned the thing about Midgard, the first thing I thought was that might be a door that it brings you to Earth. Midgard is Earth, right? From somewhere else. I thought that might be like a doorway somewhere else. But I loved this scene. And Catherine Hahn, I think her acting in this first scene here is probably my favorite acting, my favorite acted scene in the entire series so far.
Oh yeah, she's playing this. There's actually a few years back when they were doing the whole Alice in Wonderland movies, they talked about Johnny Depp's character of the Mad Hatter and how Tim Burton had came up with this idea that the way that you make people look crazy is by giving them exaggerated features. And so if you notice when she turns into this crazy witch, her hair's a lot bigger, she's a lot more, her eyes are wider while she's talking to her and everything else. And it kind of gives you the impression as people who are watching as viewers, we notice that there's something off about her. And right. So she's able to show you that she's a little bit clinically insane without ever telling you that she's gone all the way, there.
Right.
But
by the way, if you're already watching this, then you may have already had something spoiled. But we're going to be talking about things from the last episode of WandaVision. If you haven't watched it, you're going to get spoiled. There are spoilers. Spoilers ahead.
So many spoilers. So, we realized that she starts going over this idea where she starts telling her about how you created this town, and Wanda's playing off like she doesn't know. And then she kind of drops the first bombshell where she says that Quicksilver, her brother, you brought your brother back or whatever. And she said, "Oh, you did." Wanda basically says to her, "Oh, you're the one who did this." And she says, "Oh no, I was just his eyes and his ears." So somebody else did bring Pietro into this universe. That Agatha basically just took the time to go ahead and utilize that character, knowing that I can use your eyes and ears to be able to get in there and find out what's going inside that house.
Yeah, I thought she left that a little bit unclear. I thought that she may have been overstating her involvement in that, because to me, I got the impression that she was saying like, yeah, I put him there and I was using him like a puppet. But then you do get that impression that, like, oh, maybe no, I didn't put him there, but I was using him as a puppet. Like, I felt like she left it kind of unclear, which kind of leaves us, thinking like, oh, did she do it? Is someone else doing it? So
yeah. See, the reason why I thought that for sure she was saying this because she basically makes implies if I wanted to pull at your heartstrings, I would have brought your actual brother back, but I couldn't because he's decomposing with bullets all through him.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So somebody else brought him here. I just took advantage of the situation. That's what I took from it.
Yeah.
But from there, they decide that they're going to move on. And this is when Agatha becomes, the ghost of future, present, and past. And takes Wanda onto this journey. And they go where Wanda doesn't want to go. But then Agatha reminds her, well, I'm holding your kids. So you can go ahead and decide to come with me. Or I can just make these kids disappear. And so they go into the first room. And when they walk into the first room, where are we at?
First room takes us... Picture it, Sokovia. we go back to Wanda and Pietro's childhood home, an apartment, and you see their father comes home with a suitcase full of American sitcoms. All of the sitcoms that are easily visible in the suitcase are ones that we've seen Wanda recreate during the show. And we get to revisit the scene that's mentioned in Age of Ultron, where Wanda describes that, their world was literally, blown apart by a bomb that said Stark Industries on the side. And, before she said, oh, luckily we got lucky and it didn't explode. Well, Agatha has some news about that. She says, why do you think it didn't explode? And we learn that Wanda used, consciously or not, she was able to use her chaos magic to prevent that bomb from detonating.
Yeah, she actually puts a hex hold on the missile so it doesn't explode. And this is an important scene because Agatha is actually acknowledging the idea that you've had the powers all along. It had nothing to do with the actual experiments done on you by the Hydra. This is something you were born with. Right. So she starts, Agatha, makes it very clear, I'm starting to put this together, but we need to go further. One thing I did think was very clever in that whole scene was that, it also calls into question kind of the timeline of when this supposedly was supposed to happen. But I like the idea when they pull back the blankets and they pull out the Dick Van Dyke cassette tapes, or I'm sorry, the DVD set. The whole wall is stuffed with Nike shoes.
Yeah.
So he's like, also like, he's because, especially during like the Soviet Union times and everything else where things from America weren't allowed to get into the Soviet Union, and so they would basically they would bring in either bootleg versions of it or sneak it in, and that's how people made their money there. You know, Levi's were huge then, Nikes were huge then, and so I thought that was a clever way that maybe people that are younger wouldn't really catch the significance of it, but people who lived through a portion of that would know, you know, what that all meant.
Yeah,
so
yeah. Her dad's a hustler.
Yeah.
He's out here slinging those American goods to his Soviet brethren. That was great.
You think they get a better apartment, but so they go on to the next room, and right from the very beginning when they see the door, Wanda puts up you know, this is a place she doesn't want to go in, and I think that this is kind of like a smart play that they also do with Agatha here, that they utilize her to basically say to her, she's obviously the villain, but she's also reassuring her also by being like, you can't get hurt by something you've already lived through. You know what I mean? So that kind of gives Wanda the impression or the freedom to walk through the door. So when they bring him in, we see that we're back in Hydra. This is the portion we didn't see because this isn't the part that we saw during the end credits. But you see that they are brought in to be experimented on, and that nobody has survived these tests, yet they're going to go ahead and use Wanda. So Wanda's in the room, and she admits that she's a volunteer, and they tell her to touch the stone. And before she ever makes it, or at least from what we see, before she makes it all the way there, the stone comes out of the scepter and floats towards her. And as it gets closer and Wanda reaches out for it, there's an explosion of light, and you see the Mind Stone inside of it.
Right.
And so, and then you see this lovely image appear, where I kind of thought to myself, if this was subliminally in her head and that she doesn't quite remember it, in episode 5, when she comes down the stairs and she's wearing that outfit, and her son says, well, what is that? And she says, oh, it's a fortune teller. Maybe that is really in her head. What, you know, you're looking into the future, you're seeing yourself, you know?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
What do you think?
Well, you know, just to clarify, Jerry's talking about in this image, if you look very closely at the top of her head, you can see the horns, right, that are reminiscent of her classic comic book outfit that was revisited and reimagined on the Halloween episode. And this is what she sees coming out of the space stone that's in Loki's staff. Somehow as it starts to have this glow, then it becomes the Mind Stone, and I don't know. Infinity Stones do weird things, I guess.
I think that's kind of like what they're saying. You know, there's actually a line that Agatha says when they go further into the room. She's by herself inside the cell, and she's watching the Brady Bunch, and she makes it a point to, like, you know, you see I think it was the doll's name was Kitty Carry On or something like that. It was a big part of the Brady Bunch. Yeah. And as she turns off the TV, you see Agatha and Wanda standing behind her, and Agatha puts it into play, and she says, so let me see if I got this right. If you touched an Infinity Stone, and it awoken something that would have just died on the vine had it not been awakened, which is the exact thing that happens to mutants. You're born with these mutations, but there's a certain portion into your life where you actually your powers are awakened within you. It just happened to be that Wanda's powers were awakened much later in life. Possibly because there was never supposed to be mutants in the first place. You're not supposed to exist.
Yeah. This, you know, when you look at all of the different heroes that have been introduced to us in the MCU so far, they have all gained their powers from a certain event, or they gain their powers because they have a certain, type of equipment, or they've, ingested some sort of magical plant that only grows in Wakanda. But this is the first time, other than Thor, who is a god from another realm, other than Thor, this is the first hero within the MCU that we're learning was born with these innate powers. And that is mutants, Yeah. And so I think it's a really significant thing to acknowledge that she's born with these powers. And it kind of leads us into, much discussion about what will come in the next episode and in the future of the MCU. But I really enjoyed that kind of reveal as they first, were in the apartment, and then as she's there in the Hydra facility, that this is just an innate ability that she has and not something that Hydra made her into.
Yeah.
So
then, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead. So on to the next one.
Yeah. So then we go on to the next scene, and it's the door opens up, and they're inside of the Avengers mansion and or facility, and basically this is kind of a scene showing. A lot of people question this idea. Why would Wanda and Vision have this whole relationship when we've seen probably 20 minutes of screen time amongst them both? It was this idea of showing you that when she was left by herself, he was her only companion that she had, and that there was a bond there. They just didn't bother to show you all those parts. And not only that, but that Vision, who is this synthezoid who has really no ability to show you emotions, is the person that pulled her through. A lot of us thought your brother dies and you never talk about him again. And you see that there's actually a conversation she's had with him about the death of her brother. And so, and Vision breaks it down really simple for her. You're supposed to feel grief. Grief shows that you cared in the first place.
Right.
And that you're still living. So I thought that it was a scene that was basically just utilized just to kind of carry their story further. I don't think it really made much of a change of anything that was going on. It was just to show why she cares so deeply for Vision.
Right. And I would like to give a writing award to whoever wrote the line for Vision that read, "But what is grief if not the persistence of love?" That's some Shakespeare shit right there.
Yeah, it might be Shakespeare.
It could be. All the literary nerds watching this are like, guys, come on, pick up something other than a comic book. But
have you never read Hunger Games?
But I thought it was a great line, and you could see that it kind of was what Wanda needed to hear at that moment to kind of let her move forward and realize that Pietro wasn't really gone, that the grief that she carried was the persistence of the love for her brother, and that as long as she had that, she could move on and kind of prevent her, as Agatha mentions later, from kind of succumbing to the darkness.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I totally agree. So the final walk through of Wanda's life that we haven't seen is Agatha kind of pushing this fact of being like, your brother's dead, your parents are dead, Vision is dead. Everybody who held you together after all this stuff happened are now gone. What finally made you do this? And Wanda's still, forcing this idea that she didn't do this. And then something kind of clicks into her head about how you wanted to bring him back. And so you see that they go into the sword facility. And I had noticed, and I don't know if I had texted you when we were watching it, and said that the dialogue between Wanda and the receptionist was very similar to the same dialogue that was happened between Monica and the receptionist.
Yeah.
And so they walk on further, and she goes in to the facility, and she sees Hayward, and Hayward's kind of giving her this idea. And I almost felt like Hayward was trying to be compassionate while also getting her go. I think he was trying to rile her up for some reason. And you see him basically he calls him like he basically just refers to him repeatedly as a robot or like an inanimate object,
a machine.
Yeah. And that, don't you want to try to bring this back? Kind of putting that idea into her head. And so she looks down, she sees Vision torn apart. She shatters the glass and goes down there. We kind of see the same scene play through that we saw in Infinity War, where she's about to kill Vision, and Vision looks inside of her eyes and says, "I only feel you." And she puts her hand on his head and says, "I don't feel you." Like, he's gone. And that's where she has the realization she's on her own. And she leaves the facility. This whole time we've all thought that she brought Vision with her, and we find out now she left that facility without him.
Yeah, we've been given the impression that she stormed this place and just like started hexing the crap out of everybody and like threw Vision over her shoulder and walked out and was like, "F this, I'm going to Westview." But she walked in like as an angry, grief-stricken wife, and she left at the bottom of this pit of despair that she was feeling, and that was it. She left and got in her car and drove off.
Yeah, if you really think about it, the way that we see Hayward interact with her and her interact with Hayward, you would have thought there was a really, a showdown basically at the facility. In reality, I've broken more things at Marshall's. I mean, she's just broke a window. That's all she did.
Yeah.
So we see her leave the facility, and she drives on. You see an envelope sitting on the chair. You don't really understand what that's about, and where we drive into, but Westview. And Westview has been stricken just like the rest of America during the snap, and it's dilapidated. And I'm not sure if that's the right word, but you know what I'm trying to get to.
I got you.
And it's rugged and just looking gross and needs a good scrub. And you see her drive in, and she goes around, and we start seeing people that we know. We see Herb, and we see Norm, and we see Mrs. Hart. And they all kind of seem a little bit off. Like they all kind of seem a little sad. We see everybody who thought was Mephisto, which he's just a pizza delivery man. And,
To be fair, I never thought the pizza delivery guy was Mephisto. I never went that far down the rabbit hole.
And then you see further on as they go, you see the pool, where the first time she had contact with the outside world. And so we know these areas, we know what's going on. We've been to this place, but now it just doesn't look the same way. And she pulls into the driveway. When she pulls in, we see it just the remains of a bill that never happened, basically. Yeah. And she walks in there and she pulls out the envelope, and basically there's plans in that envelope for a home with a heart circled that says Wanda and Vision, I think.
It says like a gift for us or something.
Yeah.
And V and a heart.
Yeah. So, which is very, this whole time we've seen these hearts written on different things on these calendars and everything else, and everybody wants to know what it is, but nobody can put it together. And Wanda finally does what Wanda's supposed to do, and she just explodes, basically. She unleashes her magic on this plot of land, and you watch the house that we've all seen be built from the ground up. And then she really has an extra big explosion. And as she does, the hex just kind of goes across the whole town. And we see the whole town being converted into the 50s Dick Van Dyke set where we all were introduced to these characters. And then you see Wanda, as she's doing it, you start to see her glowing red and this yellow light emerging from her, creating Vision. And we're back to that first scene where we see him say, Wanda, welcome home.
Yeah, we see the entire creation, but instead of, when we see them sitting on the couch, which, is how the first episode ends, everything kind of goes away, and you see the stage lights, and you hear the slow clap up in the studio audience, and that's the end of that scene. And Wanda, has just revisited this terrible, the very bottom of her grief. And then she gets this moment of happiness where Vision is recreated and it seems like everything's great. And then Agatha, shuts it off, and she's Agatha, just sitting there mocking her. She shuts
it off and shows you, no, it's just an empty set.
Yeah.
There's nothing here.
Yeah.
And she leaves. She leaves her there by herself. And for us to hear her children screaming for her. That's right. So she goes running out the door, and as she runs out, she sees old Billy and Tommy on leashes,
strung up,
and Agatha is floating up in the sky in a pretty comic accurate costume. I mean, other than the white hair, and she basically tells Wanda, you weren't supposed to exist. You are using a power that is uncontrollable, and that's when we finally get to hear it. She's using chaos magic for the first time. We hear it, and then she kind of says, if you're using this, you can only be one person. You have to be the Scarlet Witch, which is this idea that she is some kind of prophecy or something among the witches, must know that there's this powerful witch that comes out that has the ability to change it all. And we all know now that after it says the Scarlet Witch, screen goes to black, and we're all like, what the hell? What happened? The boys are still on leashes.
Yeah. And then, of course, after last week, I'm not doing anything until I watch all the way through to the end of the credits.
So what? The end credits.
Yeah. What do we see?
We see Hayward, and they tell him the weapon is ready, and he says, he goes walking through there menacingly, and as he walks through, he mentions that who knew that all we needed was something that basically something that Wanda had touched to go ahead and activate our weapon. And they scan up, and as they're scanning up, you see the white feet to the white calves all the way up, and you see a white Vision sitting there. And then they turn him on, and he's a complete synthezoid. That's it. No emotion, no nothing, just a massive weapon. This episode, I think, I know it was mind-blowing in the way that there's so much I know for a fact, I've looked through the internet and everything else, people are like, oh, it was a filler episode. This was the furthest thing from a filler episode you're ever going to see. They gave you everything you've been complaining about for the last 8 episodes in this episode. They gave you a backstory for the characters. They gave you words that you need. We've all been waiting to hear. basically the only thing we needed to hear her actually say was calling her a mutant, and I still think that's coming. So I think Wanda episode 8. I think this is the one.
This episode, as someone who has been waiting for the whole Agatha Harkness reveal, seeing this, be revealed on the last episode, and then seeing her backstory, and then her as in this, this reimagining of her character, because this is not the Agatha Harkness from the comic books, at least not yet. And seeing this was finally getting this like unraveling of the character was like such a great episode for me. And then we get to see Wanda's progression as having these innate abilities and learning that she had them from birth, and learning that she's this prophesied Scarlet Witch. He's saying the Scarlet Witch the same way that we say, we would say something like, this is the Highlander. Like, it's a person with a title, and she's this like, person of prophecy. Like, we got a ton of stuff here. We saw that Tommy and Billy are still alive, so we know our hopes for Young Avengers are still there. This episode was great. Anybody who calls this a filler episode can eat my socks.
Yeah. Most people who consider this to be a filler episode are disappointed by what they saw, are people that probably aren't old enough into life to realize that life is full of disappointments. And so Marvel's just helping you out. But the best part about today is that we've decided that all of our hints and ideas and Easter eggs that we think that we saw, we're going to go ahead and split it into a separate episode, because we realize that not everybody has 3 hours to go over a 45-minute television show.
That's right. So
don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on notifications, and follow us next time for our next episode.
Thanks, guys. See you next time.
Stay nerdy.